Hello, welcome to another edition of iDS Talks. My name is Jonathan Sachs, Chief Revenue Officer at iDS, and I'm joined once again by my colleague, Tim LaTulippe, who is a director over in our London office. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're here today to talk about version 4, the latest edition of D3, your delightfully digestible data. And I think our listeners would be curious to find out, what is it you've been up to?
Great question. And I hope listeners do wonder that. Otherwise, I'm not sure what I'm doing here. But it's been an interesting, probably 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. We try to send out these sort of digestible bite-sized kind of news blast every month, maybe every month and a half. They're not right on cue, but the whole concept is to give people this easily readable text format kind of thing right in their inbox that tells them salient issues and investigations, e-discovery, maybe what we as a team have been up to. Very, very lighthearted, usually a bit of humor in there. This particular version we call the Hay Fever edition. So each month usually tracks some kind of thing going on here in the UK or somewhere in Europe or even the rest of the world. Just kind of bring some lightheartedness to people's days.
As long as it's just hay fever and not scarlet or yellow, I think we're fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I'll stay clear of those.
Got it.
We've had some stuff. We've had some interesting things going on. I think you and I and some others talked about a bit in the media. We picked up on the rail minister here in the UK having his laptop stolen. That made for some interesting fodder and conversation. We recorded a podcast on that. I think the link's included in our blast, so that's kind of out there in the ether for people to listen to at their leisure. In terms of kind of what our team's been up to, it's been pretty lively. Dan Ruprecht and myself were both in Paris recently, which used to be quite frequent. COVID be damned, sort of slowed that down a little bit, but we've been back there with some frequency already this year. And we were there for Paris Arbitration Week, in addition to seeing, friends and family and clients and all sorts of people. We got quite a bit out of that meeting. We got a little bit of spring weather, which ties into the hay fever thing. We got a little bit of spring weather in Paris, which is always nice for a few hours. But it was really good to see people come together from not just France, but all over Europe and partly the US and Asia as well, come together for Paris Arbitration Week. It's where arbitration lawyers speak about a variety of topics across multiple venues. Paris is definitely one of the only cities in Europe that could handle this kind of event. London as well, I'm sure. But the ability to kind of have so many people there talking about so many salient topics. I think there's 8,000 people attend this event, so it's not everyone's cup of tea in terms of volume of people, but we really enjoyed that. Shortly before that, Dom Tucker here on our team also spoke at an event with the Professional Negligence Lawyers Association, PNLA, if I've got the acronym right. Dom spoke about, electronic disclosure issues and touched a bit on false evidence, which has been kind of an interesting topic for our firm for quite a while. That sort of brings me on to another event we recently hosted at our offices. Sometimes we use external venues, but our own office is quite cozy, and our boardroom's quite friendly for people. So we had a number of people there. We'll probably have to run it again. It was slightly oversubscribed for the space, but we kind of touched on how false evidence has popped up for iDS, in what jurisdictions, under what circumstances. It's not just in investigations. Oftentimes it's stuff coming in laterally, left and right, in arbitrations and litigations, stuff not being filed even properly as evidence. It's just being chucked in as exhibits. I had this conversation where you said ABC, defendant says no way, never had that conversation. And then a sort of look into those issues transpires. So the takeaway from that is, I think you even say it, Jonathan, sometimes, but trust your gut. If something doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, just give it another check. We're starting to see a lot of this. I don't know if it's more prolific or if we're just noticing it more, or if it's both. I don't think it has to be any one or the other. But oftentimes these are coming to us through the clients recognizing bits of evidence or exhibits and saying, I didn't write that contract. I didn't write that email. I didn't take that photo. I didn't have that chat. And it's that kind of insight that's kind of raising flags and allowing us to do what we do best. So, if that's something of interest to you, or that's, something that's popping up in your cases, bear that in mind. Give us a shout. We certainly have a lot of experience with it as of late.
Tim, we actually, I've had the pleasure of having a podcast or two on the topic of fake evidence with a couple of different experts here at IDS, whether it's involved contracts, signatures, text messages, even what Mark Gianturco, IDS's chief technology officer, describes as a fake computer, where we were imaging a computer and the computer was bought 3 days prior to the capture, I believe, if that's correct. And I want to go back to the trust your gut, because I think one of the things that you say and other folks at IDS say on that trust your gut piece is, if there's a single piece of evidence, there's no original and no chain of custody, and it's a complicated dog ate my evidence kind of story. That's when, if your spidey sense is going off, your gut's telling you something's not right, that's when the time comes to reach out to folks like you and other members of our team, right? Go to an expert to get a second opinion to determine whether or not your gut was right or not. Is this fake? Is it not?
Yeah, that's right. And that sort of second opinion is key. I mean, sometimes these things come to us after one or two or more people have sort of dealt with it. We're not always the first port of call. And that second opinion from our perspective isn't necessarily expensive. I mean, I know that can be relative based on quantums and budgets, but just having a quick chat with someone on our team is really not going to disturb the budget of your case. So if you want a sort of opinion on this kind of thing, reach out. We've even got a simple checklist. It's more aesthetically pleasing than useful, perhaps, but it's quite helpful. Maybe you tape it to your desk, or you look at it when you have your coffee in the morning.
Right. Now, two other things that I think, as I recall from my reading of D3, as I'm one of the lucky folks who gets it. And by the way, for those of you who aren't currently getting Tim's D3 Delightfully Digestible Data email, by all means, reach out to him. You can either contact him through his IDS email or send him a note on LinkedIn. He'd happily add you to the list. But there are two other topics that I recall seeing: cross-border, which seems like we're always involved in that, and then furlough fraud, somewhat unique to England. So, what do you want to share about those two topics?
Yeah, I guess in reverse order, I'd steer anyone to articles and recordings with Dan Ruprecht on furlough fraud. I mean, I think he's recently covered some bits on that. Our team were a little bit, I won't say premature, but we were certainly early to that sort of line of thinking. The whole of Europe and the UK in particular was still in, hold on tight mode, kind of trying to stay alive. And that was the purpose of furlough and bounce back loans and all of the things that the Treasury here did to keep things alive. The concept of furlough fraud, just the 10-second version, because I'd rather people listen to Dan Ruprecht talk about this than me go in a rabbit hole. But furlough fraud here was meant to pay people's wages in a way that the government subsidized the companies quite heavily, such that they were only paying 20% of the employees' salaries out of pocket, sort of thing. But the idea was they were meant to go home and sit down and not work. And the large majority of these people were not professional services people. They worked on, tills and shops, or they worked loading trucks for non-essential companies and these kinds of things. So the whole idea was, how do we leverage data to understand if people were working when they were legitimately and from a regulatory perspective, not meant to be working through the furlough agreement. So that's an interesting topic. It's still to come. So I implore people to check that out if they got the time. We can follow up with links or point you to our website where you can find that content. We also continue to work on cross-border matters, and that's a very catch-all term. I admit cross-border could mean lots of things to lots of people, but in a general sense, it typically means a dispute born in one country that has elements of evidence, custodians, individuals in one or more extraterritorial places. So if it's venued in the United States, it has people in Canada, Germany, Austria. That's very much a cross-border matter. There's a couple of ways you could spin that. It could be a UK company that's dealing with a DOJ request, also a cross-border matter. But we get quite a variety of these, and no two are alike. They have overlapping elements, but the DNA of them are different each time. Sometimes we take on cases with data that are based in Europe, but they're all data points related to people in America. So by virtue of data protection and the way it works in Europe, those people almost become part of a European embassy of data in a strange way that seems counterintuitive. But we have to treat their data generally as those in Europe, or at least our data protection council we work with tell us this. So navigating that, scrubbing, pseudo anonymization, all of this kind of thing is something we do regularly. How do we work with teams, message these expectations? All of that's very important. There's rarely a time where we say no, can't do it, won't do it, full stop. There's usually some kind of mechanism we can work out as long as legal advice has been brought in, data protection lawyers have given consideration. We know where to raise the flags. We know how to effectuate the transfers as and where. We're happy to see it continue. Obviously, it's interesting work for our firm, but I also think it's a nice segue into what we're looking forward to in the next couple of weeks. So I'm speaking again. I think it's on the 13th of April, but it's with the American Bar Association, ABA, and it has to do with American disputes and American corporations and their lawyers understanding and dealing with data in Europe and how it makes it way back to the US, under what circumstances. Now, we don't give legal advice, we're not a law firm, but because we deal with it so heavily, it's definitely a place of comfort for us. And it's a topic I like speaking about. So I look forward to speaking with my esteemed colleagues on the ABA panel on that very topic.
Nice. Well, Tim, I was looking forward to getting your D3 email. I enjoyed reading it. Admittedly, I was aware of a lot that was in it, but sometimes I forget all that you and our colleagues over in London are doing. So I wanted to thank you for continuing to put that content out. Again, if you want to get on that list, reach out to Tim. I also want to thank you, Tim, for joining us today, as well as our regular subscribers and those that may be first-time listeners. If you'd like to learn more about IDS or want to subscribe to our IDS Talks podcast, you can visit idsinc.com or wherever you normally get your podcasts from. Thank you again for joining us. I look forward to talking more about data with you in our next edition of IDS Talks. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.